told you that name? Answer me. Why? Are you afraid to hear it again? I asked you who told you. 40 years, Solomon. 40 years and you still don't know? Who are you? Look at me, Solomon. Look at me.
The old motor park at Owode emptied at noon on Fridays, the way it had emptied every Friday for 40 years. The lorries stopped loading. The touts stopped shouting. The women who sold rice under the zinc sheds covered their pots and came out to stand at the edge of the tarmac, because whatever else happened in that town, nobody wanted to miss this. At 12:20, a green Peugeot came through the gate, old enough to be somebody's grandfather, the paint gone chalky on the bonnet. The man who climbed out of it was wearing white, not the white of a man who owns 2 white agbadas, the white of a man who owns 11 and keeps a woman whose only job is to starch them. Gold buttons. Cap tilted the way a chief tilts it. On his wrist, a watch worth more than every vehicle in that park put together. Chief Solomon Coker. Cocoa, transport, 11 trucks, 2 warehouses in Elisha. The richest man Owode had ever produced, and the only man in Osun State who did what he was about to do. He walked to the mango tree at the far end of the park, where 15 beggars sat on a raffia mat in the dust. And he sat down on the ground with them. He did not put a cloth down first. He did not send a boy to sweep the place. He gathered that white agbada in his fist, lowered himself onto the mat like a man half his age, and took a chipped enamel bowl from the hands of a one-legged woman named Mama Rose. Beans and red pepper sauce, the cheapest food in that market, the same food every Friday for 40 years. He ate it with his fingers. He ate all of it. Then he did the thing nobody in Owode could explain. He set out 1 extra bowl. He filled it himself. He covered it with a leaf, and nobody, not the beggars, not his driver, not his own son, was permitted to touch it. The town had theories. The town had 30 years of theories. Nobody had ever asked him. In 40 years, not one person had been foolish enough to ask Chief Solomon Coker why. That Friday, somebody answered. At the far end of the mat, where the shade ran out, sat a blind old man in a brown shirt, washed until the color gave up. He had come to that mat for 3 years, and had not spoken one word to anybody in all that time. He lifted his head toward the sound of the chief's voice, and he said, "Sonny." The chief's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. "Sonny. Comfort's boy." The bowl left his fingers. It broke on the hard ground in 3 pieces, and the pepper sauce ran red into the dust, and the richest man in Owode went down onto his knees in front of the whole market in a white agbada that cost more than a car. "Who told you that name?" His voice came out of him torn. "Nobody has called me that name in 40 years. Nobody living knows it. Who told you?" The blind man reached into his own bowl, took a piece of beans, and went on eating. 3 weeks before that Friday, a young woman named Grace Johnson was still selling roasted corn 20 steps from that mat, and she still believed her father was a thief. Grace Johnson was 27, and in Owode, she was a stranger and would go on being one for another 20 years. She had been born in Kano, married there at 18, buried her husband there at 21 when a fuel tanker took him and his motorcycle off the Zaria Road, and buried her mother the year after. When there was nothing left but a room she could not pay for, her father said one sentence to her. "We are going home." She had never seen home. She had grown up hearing 3 things about Owode. The soil was red, the mangoes were sweet, and nothing else. They arrived with 2 bags and a 6-year-old, and what met them was not rudeness. Owode was too polite for rudeness. It was a silence. When she gave her surname at the borehole, the women's conversation changed direction. When she rented the room behind the mechanic's shed, the landlord asked twice which Johnson, then said, ah, and named a price the room did not deserve. It took 4 months to hear what they called her father. She heard it from a child. That was the part that stayed with her. A boy of about 11, calling across the gutter to his friend, pointing with his chin at an old blind man feeling his way along a wall. Thief Moses. Not said with hatred, said the way you say the name of a street. She went home and stood in the doorway and asked her father what happened in Owode. He sat on his stool by the window. With his face turned toward light he could no longer see. "Is the water boiling?" he said. "Papa, What happened here? Grace, is the water boiling? That was 3 years ago. She had asked 11 more times since. She had counted. And once, only once, and it had frightened her. He had said very quietly, "Leave it in the ground where it is buried." So she stopped asking. She built a stall from 3 planks and a market umbrella at the mouth of the motor park, roasted corn in season and boiled groundnut out of it, and made enough for 1 room and food and eye drops that no longer did anything. And every Friday she watched the richest man in Osun State sit in the dust with the beggars and thought what everybody thought. God bless him. Her father sat on that mat too. She noticed the thing about the hand in the first year. The chief served the mat himself, carried each bowl along it, called every person by name, asked after their legs and their children and their eyes. He put a bowl into her father's hands exactly once, the first Friday. Every Friday after that, her father sat with his hands flat on his knees until the chief had passed him. Then he turned his face slightly toward Mama Rose, and Mama Rose carried the bowl back down the mat, grumbling, and gave it to him. Grace asked her about it once. "And that one, your father is a proud man for somebody with nothing." Mama Rose waved a hand. "He will not take from the chief's hand. Fine, I have 2 hands. Why won't he take it?" The old woman looked at her a moment too long, then laughed and said something about old men and their heads. The other thing Grace noticed was the scars. 2 thin, pale bands, 1 round each of her father's wrists, gone shiny with age. She had seen them her whole life. When she was small, her mother had told her he fell, and children accept that a man can fall in such a way that both his wrists tie themselves. She was 27 before she understood that the word for those marks is not fall. Lie. Precious came back from school at 9:30 that Monday, 4 hours early, and her mother knew before the girl reached the stall. St. Andrews took 30 new students a year on the Coker Trust Scholarship. Uniform, books, fees, 1 meal a day. In Owode, that was not a scholarship, it was a life. Precious had come second in her primary class, 2nd out of 51. They said to return it. She held the form folded against her chest, the way you hold a thing you have stopped hoping for. He said the board did not approve. Did not approve what? Your marks are on the paper. Mummy. He was looking at the name. He looked at it for a long time, and then he called another man, and the other man also looked at the name. Grace left the corn on the fire and walked up the hill. The headmaster in the brown safari suit would not meet her eyes. "Madam, the board decides. I don't decide. 30 places. My daughter came second." "Madam, is it because her father is dead? Is it because we came from Kano? This is my father's town." And he looked up then, and his face was not cruel. That was what she could not forget. It was tired and slightly ashamed, and he said it in a lowered voice, like a man telling you your child is sick. "Madam, it is the name." Grace stood in that office and heard the ceiling fan turning. "What is wrong with my name?" "Nothing is wrong with it. Try again next year." She walked back down. Precious was on an upturned crate by the stall with her notebook open on her knees. Doing multiplication nobody had assigned her, because the girl did not know how to stop being a student just because 2 men in an office had decided she was not one. 6 cobs had burnt through, black to the core. Grace sat down on the ground beside the crate. "Mummy, is it because of Grandpa?" "Eat your groundnut. The boys at the gutter say." "I know what they say." It came out harder than she meant, and she saw it land, and she pulled the child in against her shoulder. "They are wrong." She said it with her whole chest, and she was not sure. That was the truth of it, and she carried it like a stone in a shoe. Because an innocent man defends himself. An innocent man, accused for 40 years in his own town, says something. Her father said nothing at all. That night, with her hands in cold water, Grace made a decision. She was going to find out what happened in 1985. Not for him. He had made it clear he did not want it found. For the 9-year-old whose name had been read off a list by 2 men in an office, put back in an envelope, and returned. The surveyor came on Tuesday, and the men with him were not from Owode. They walked the park with a measuring wheel and sprayed orange marks on the tarmac, and behind them came a man in a gray shirt with the sleeves folded twice, carrying nothing, which is how you know a man is in charge. Victor Coker was 38. His mother's face, his father's shoulders. 11 years in Lagos before he came home to run Coker & Sons. He wore no gold. He had a way of listening with his head tilted that made you feel important for about 4 seconds, and then he said the thing he had decided before you opened your mouth. He climbed onto the loading shed ledge and waited for the noise to come down on its own. The company had bought the land, park, sheds, the scrub behind the mango tree, 3 months ago, signed and gazetted. A produce depot was going up. Concrete floor, weighbridge, cold store, 40 jobs. Owode cocoa graded in Owode instead of carried to Elisha and graded there by somebody's cousin. The drivers would move to the new park with an allowance. The market women got first refusal on the new stalls. Controlled rent, in writing. Nobody could argue with any of it. That was the thing about Victor Coker. Demolition begins in 30 days. Somebody at the back said, "The tree?" He looked toward the mango tree, where 15 people sat on a mat in the shade, listening. The tree is standing where the weighbridge goes. Then he came down off the ledge and crossed the tarmac to her stall, and did the thing Grace would think about for the rest of her life, and did it kindly, and that was what made it unbearable. "Madam Johnson, you are Moses Johnson's daughter." The park had gone quiet in that particular way. "I am. I know about the school. I heard this morning, and I am not going to insult you by pretending the board made a mistake. The board did what this town has been doing for 40 years, and it will go on doing it after you and I are dead. Towns do not change their minds. They only change their old people for new ones." There was a corn cob in her hand, and she had forgotten it was there. "There is a boarding school in Ela. I will pay your daughter's fees to the end of secondary school. I will pay your relocation. Put 200,000 in your hand for the shop, and make one call, and you will have a lockup in Ela Market by next month in your own name. And what do I do for you? You go." He said it gently. "Take your daughter. Take your father. Go and be Johnson somewhere that has never heard the name. In Ela, she is a girl who came second in her class. Here she is a Johnson. I cannot change that. I can only buy you a road out of it. And my father? Your father does not come back to Owode." There it was, in the sunlight, in front of everybody, in a reasonable voice, from a man who believed he was being generous. And the terrible part, she could feel it happening in her own chest, was that some of her wanted to say yes, for the price of agreeing, publicly, that her father was what they said he was. "Take your time. Come to the office." The pickup went out through the gate, and Grace became slowly aware that 15 people on a mat had heard every word, and one of them was blind, and one of them was her father. He sat with his hands flat on his knees. He did not turn his head. When the sound of the engine was gone, he took his stick and walked home alone along the wall, and she could not make her legs follow him. Mama Rose came to the stall that evening and sat on the crate without being invited, which was how Mama Rose did everything. "Give me corn. You have no money. Give me corn, and I will give you something better than money." Grace gave her the smallest cob. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know." "Take it." Look at me, 68 years old, sleeping behind a mosque with a plastic sheet over my leg when it rains. If a rich man's son offered me a lockup in Ela Market, I would be gone before sunset. He wants me to say my father is a thief. He didn't say that. He said it. Mama Rose chewed for a while. "Your father is the only man on that mat who has never told me his story. Every one of us has told the whole mat our story 11 times. Where we came from, whose son cheated us, what the sickness took. In 3 years, your father has said nothing but, 'Thank you.' To me, and 'Sorry.' When he steps on somebody, that is not a normal old man. You know something? I know one thing, and it is not about your father." She looked out at the mango tree in the dusk. "I was there on the first Friday, 1985. I still had my 2 legs. I was selling gari in the corner where the tire man is now, and a young man came into this park at midday and started looking into people's faces. Looking? Like a man looking for a passenger who did not come. Every beggar, every tout, every face in this park. And when he finished, he stood by that tree and cried standing up, in front of everybody, and nobody knew him, and nobody knew what to say. She picked the cob back up. The next Friday he came back with food. 40 years, my daughter. He buries his wife's mother. He is on that mat by 12. His trucks burn in Ibadan. He is on that mat by 12. What is he doing? Mama Rose stood and tucked her crutch under her arm. Looking for somebody, she said, without turning round. And when he finds them, may God help him. The specialist was booked for Wednesday. Chief Coker found out on Saturday evening, from his wife, which was how his son preferred to do things. Patience Coker was 52. She had been married to that man for 39 years, and still could not have told you the name of the thing that was wrong with him. Victor has arranged a doctor. From Lagos, for your head. There is nothing wrong with my head. That is what I said. She sat down across from him and arranged her wrapper and looked at him from a distance of 2 feet and a very great many kilometers. He says it is a formality. He used the word capacity. 4 times. She waited. Solomon, tell me about the Fridays. And there it was again, the same wall, 39 years old, as smooth as the day it was built. He picked up the cocoa returns. It is food for poor people. There is nothing to tell. I have watched you eat on the ground for 39 years. Her voice did not rise. That was not how Patience fought. When my mother died, you went. On the day we buried our first son, you stood up from the burial at 11:30 and drove to that motor park and sat in the dust. And I came back into this house and lay on that floor and asked God, what kind of woman marries a man who has a second wife made out of beggars? It is not another woman. I know that. Do you think I would still be here if it were? Another woman I could fight. Another woman has a house you can drive to. She stood. I have spent my whole life in a house with 2 men and a locked room. At the door she stopped. Whatever it is coming out now. These things always come out when the man is old and cannot run. He found his son in the office at the back of the compound an hour later. You are cutting the tree. Victor set down his pen. There was a silence in that room which both of them understood completely, and neither had ever once put into words in 38 years. Yes, I am cutting the tree. Move the weighbridge 40 feet. Do you know what they call you in Elisha? Victor stood. He was taller than his father, which had happened when he was 16, and had never stopped being a fact in that room. Baba Friday, not chief, not sir. The Baba Friday, the one who eats with beggars. And they laugh, and then they discount our grade, because you do not pay full price to a man with something wrong in his head. I have 6 years of figures. Then show me the figures. You have never once looked at them. His voice had risen, which almost never happened, and he brought it back down. I have carried this since I was 28, and I have never asked you why, because I decided a long time ago that I would rather not know. That is a lie, his father said. You know. Something passed between them that had been passing between them for 10 years. Wednesday, Victor said, please cooperate. Friday came. The mango tree had an orange X sprayed on the trunk at chest height. The Peugeot came through the gate at 12:20. Mama Rose handed up the bowls. The chief carried them along the mat, asked Papa Joseph about his leg, and Mama Blessing about her grandson in Osogbo. And when he reached the blind man at the end, he set a bowl on the ground beside him, as he had done every Friday for 3 years, and moved on. He sat. He ate. He filled the extra bowl and covered it with a leaf. And the blind man lifted his head and said, Sonny. Every person on that mat turned. Sonny, Comfort's boy. The bowl broke on the ground. Who told you that name? Nobody has called me that name in 40 years. Who told you? And Moses Johnson, blind, 72, in a brown shirt that had lost its color, reached into his bowl with steady fingers and went on eating. Nobody agreed afterwards how long the chief stayed on his knees. Mama Rose said 2 minutes. Papa Joseph said the length of a whole prayer. What they agreed on was that he asked 4 times. The blind man never answered once, and in the end, the driver had to lift his master under the arm and walk him back to the Peugeot in front of the entire market. Grace reached the mat as the car went out through the gate. She knelt in front of her father and put both hands on his knees. Papa, what did you say to him? Is Precious back from school? Papa, that man was on the ground in front of everybody. Grace. His hand found her wrist and closed on it, and the strength in it shocked her. She had been treating him like something breakable for 3 years. Take me home. He would not eat. He sat by the window with his face toward the light for the rest of that day and most of the next, and when Precious tried to read to him on Saturday night, he said, "Not tonight," which he had never said before, and the child came out into the yard and cried where her mother could not see her. On Sunday morning, Grace stood in the doorway with her wrapper already tied for traveling. "I am going to Alesha tomorrow. There is a court there. There are records. Whatever happened in this town in 1985, somebody wrote it down." "Grace, leave it in the ground. Then tell me what is in it." It bounced off the zinc. "One sentence. You did it or you did not. That is all I have asked you for 3 years." I pleaded guilty. The room went very still. He sat upright with his hands on his knees and his ruined eyes open, and said it in the flat voice of a man reading out a receipt. "In 1985, in the magistrate court at Elisha, I stood up and said I stole 4,000 naira from a produce buyer named Chief Isaac Thomas. The magistrate asked me twice if I understood. I said yes. He gave me 12 years. I served 11. A pause. That is what is in the ground. Now go and boil the water." The records office at Alesha smelled of paper and rain. It cost her 4 hours and 2,000 naira in search fees that appeared on no receipt. 1985, Johnson, Moses, larceny. The woman ran a finger down the hand-ruled column. "It is here." Grace's heart came up into her throat. "The entry is here. The file is not here." She turned the ledger round and put a fingernail on a line of faded biro. Somebody signed it out and did not bring it back. The date was the 14th of March, 2015. In the name column, Coker & Sons Produce Limited, Rep. Beside it, the officer who released it. E. Wilson Sr., Registrar. 10 years. Nobody asked for it in 10 years? The woman shrugged with her whole upper body. "Madam, if everybody who signed out a file brought it back, we would need a bigger building." Grace copied the line into the back of her daughter's arithmetic book, twice, in case one of them smudged. "The buyer," she said. "Chief Isaac Thomas. Is he dead?" The woman was already closing the ledger. "Ask at the produce exchange. Those ones do not die easily." The notice was on her stall when she got back at 8 that night, tied to the umbrella pole with orange twine. Not from the council, from the company. Structure not registered for relocation. Remove within 7 days. Every other stall at the mouth of that park carried the blue relocation slip. Mama Cootie's Provisions, the tire man, the woman with the sachet water and phone cards. Hers was the only orange one. Grace stood in the dark with her hand flat on the paper and understood, completely and without needing it explained, that a man in a gray shirt had known she went to Elisha before her bus got back. She did not cry. What arrived in her chest instead was cold and clean, and it took her a moment to recognize it, because she had not felt it since the day they told her about the tanker on the Zaria Road. It was rage, and it turned out to be extremely useful. She started writing down names. Every beggar on that mat, Mama Rose, Papa Joseph, Mama Blessing, the boy they called Junior, the deaf man, all 15. Then the ones who had gone, the dead, the ones who moved to Osogbo, the ones from 10 and 20 and 30 years back, as far as Mama Rose's memory would carry her. The old woman's memory carried her a long way. By Thursday, there were 106 names in the back of a child's exercise book, and Grace sat on the floor with the lamp and could not see anything in them at all. Precious took the book out of her hands. "You are supposed to put them in columns," she said, in the tone of a person explaining something to a much slower person. "Mrs. Bello says a list is not information. You have to sort it." She turned to a clean page, ruled 2 lines down it with the edge of a ruler, and started copying. Men on one side, women on the other, and beside each one the age her mother had written down. It took her 20 minutes. She was 9 years old, and she had come second out of 51. 91 men, she said. 15 women. Then she frowned at her own column. "Mummy, all the men are old." Grace looked at the page for a long time. "Say that again." All the men are old. The ladies are all sorts. Mama Rose is 68, and the one you wrote. Cece is 22. She pushed the book back. But the men are all old, every single one. Grace sat on that floor with her daughter's ruled columns in her hands. He had never been feeding beggars. He had been checking faces. 91 old men in 40 years, and every new one who came onto that mat got his hand held and his face looked into, the way you look at a photograph in bad light, and then something went out of him, and he let go and served the food. He is not looking for somebody, Grace said out loud, in the empty room. He has already found him, and he is still coming. The Coker house stood on the hill above the church, behind a wall with broken bottles set in the top, and Grace walked up to the gate on Saturday morning in her church wrapper with a child's exercise book in a nylon bag. The gate man said the chief was not seeing anybody. Tell him Moses Johnson's daughter is at the gate. The gate opened in 90 seconds. He received her in the back parlor, and she was shocked by him. On the mat, he sat straight. In his own house, in a plain buba, with no gold anywhere on him, he looked like exactly what he was, an old man who had not slept in 8 days. Sit down, my daughter, please. She sat on the edge of the chair and opened the book on her knees. In 40 years, you have fed 106 people on that mat. 91 of them are men. Every man you ever stopped for, every man whose hand you held, was over 60. She looked up. You were not being kind to beggars. You were checking faces. And 3 years ago, you found the one you were looking for, and you have gone on sitting in the dust with him every week since, and you have never once said his name. The clock in the corner ticked 11 times. Who is he to you? He is my brother, said Chief Solomon Coker. Grace's hands closed on the book. Same mother. Comfort. She had him first, by a man called Johnson, who went to Jos before the boy could walk. She had me 9 years later by my father. Moses was taken to Ipitu to his grandmother. I stayed here with her. He was looking at the floor. We did not grow up together. We found each other as grown men carrying loads in that motor park, 2 boys off the same woman's back, and for 3 years he was the closest thing I had in this world. And in 1985 he went to prison. For 4,000 naira he did not take. The old man's head came up. Say that again. An innocent man does not stop defending himself. A guilty man does. A guilty man goes quiet, and stays quiet, and dies quiet. And my father has been quiet for 40 years, and I have hated him for it. She was standing. She had not noticed getting up. And then I sat on my floor on Thursday night with my daughter's arithmetic book, and I understood. You do not spend 40 years looking into the faces of old men because your brother stole something, sir. You do it because you did. Chief Solomon Coker did not move. Then, very slowly, he put both hands over his face. Get out of my house, he said. Sir, get out of my house. He said it into his palms. I am begging you. Please. Was it you? Get out. He was on his feet and shouting, and the houseboy came running from the kitchen, and Grace picked up her bag and walked down the drive and out through the gate with her ears ringing. She got as far as the church before she had to sit down on the step. He had not denied it. A man accused in his own parlor of a theft another man served 11 years for. A man with 11 trucks and a lawyer in Elisha, and every reason on earth to say, "How dare you?" Had put his hands over his face and begged her to leave. She sat there a long time. Then she got up, because there was one more line in that notebook she had not used yet, and a woman at a counter in Elisha had told her that those ones do not die easily. Victor Coker did not wait. On Monday, a Lagos number rang the house to say the specialist could not travel, that the assessment would be done at the clinic in Ikeja, and that a car was already on the road. On Monday afternoon, Chief Coker got into that car, because his wife asked him to, and because a man who has begun to come apart will agree to almost anything that buys him 4 quiet days. On Monday night, his phone stopped connecting, not switched off, ringing out, in a drawer in a private room in Ikeja, because the protocol required that the patient be free of external stress for 72 hours. There was nothing illegal in any part of it. That was Victor all over. He did not need to break a single law. He needed his father 400 kilometers away for 4 days and a report on file that said, diminished capacity. And after that, it would not matter what the old man said to anybody, because a man with that report in his file is a man whose words are a symptom. The bulldozers came on Wednesday, 16 days early. By the time anybody understood what was happening, the shed roofs were down, and the tire man was dragging his compressor across the tarmac by hand. Grace got there at 7:10 with Precious's hand in hers. 9 of them were still on the mat. Mama Rose was standing in front of the trunk with her crutch held out sideways, like a woman blocking a doorway, shouting at a boy in a hard hat who was about 22 and clearly wished he had gone into any other line of work. "Move, Mama! Come and move me!" "Mama, please. 40 years. 40 years this tree has fed this town, and you came here this morning with your father's machine." They moved her gently, one on each arm, and set her down 12 feet away, and one of them apologized, and she hit him with the crutch. The saw took 11 minutes. The mango tree at the old motor park at Owode came down across the tarmac at 18 minutes past 7 on a Wednesday morning, and the sound it made was not a crash. It was a long, low, tearing thump that everybody in that park felt through the soles of their feet. Grace had her daughter's face pressed against her hip so the child would not see. And she looked up, and 200 meters away, at the mouth of the lane that came down from the houses, an old blind man was standing with one hand flat on the wall. He had walked there alone. He had heard it from the room. He stood in the lane with his hand on the concrete and his mouth open, and nobody went to him, and after a while he turned round and felt his way back up the lane the way he had come. He did not eat that night. He did not eat on Thursday. He lay on his mat with his face to the wall and would not answer his own daughter's voice. And when Precious came and sat by his head and started reading from her English book because she did not know what else in the world to do, he said, "Small girl, not today." Grace sat outside on the step with her arms round her knees and understood, for the first time, that her father was going to die of this. Not of hunger, of the tree. The letter came on Thursday morning, brought by hand, in a company envelope. Fees. Full fees, not to the end of secondary school, but to the end of university. In writing, on letterhead, with a schedule showing the amounts year by year up to a bachelor's degree at a federal university. 600,000 naira relocation. A lockup in Ila Market on a 5-year lease. And attached, a single sheet with a line for her signature. I, Grace Johnson, daughter of Moses Johnson, confirm that I have made no allegation against Coker & Sons Produce Limited or any member of the Coker family in respect of the matter of 1985, that I accept the conviction of Moses Johnson as lawfully entered, and that I make no claim, now or in future, arising from it. She sat on that step for 2 hours. Inside the room, her father was lying with his face to the wall. 400 kilometers away, an old man was in a private room with his phone in a drawer and a doctor writing a report about his mind. "Take it," Mama Rose had said. "My daughter, take it." Grace got the biro from the nail by the door, smoothed the paper on the flat top of the step, and put the tip of it on the line. "Mummy?" Precious was in the doorway in her nightdress. "What are you signing?" Grace looked at the paper, then at the child, then at the paper. "Is it the school?" Precious came down and pushed herself against her mother's arm, the way she had done since she was 2. "Mama Rose said a man brought a letter, and I should not ask you about it, so I did not ask you. But she has been gone since morning, so now I want to ask you." "Gone where?" "To Ila, in a bus." The girl said it simply, the way children deliver the end of the world. She took her things. She said to tell you she is sorry, and that at her age God will forgive her, and that you should take the money too. Grace sat with the biro in her hand. Somewhere over the wall, a woman was pounding yam, and a radio was playing, and the town went on being a town. "Mummy, what are you signing?" Grace looked down at the line where her name was supposed to go. "I am signing," she said, "that your grandfather is a thief." She said it out loud so that she would have to hear it. Then she folded the paper in half, and in half again, and tore it across. Chief Isaac Thomas was 88 years old and lived in Bodia, Ibadan, in a house that had been magnificent in 1991 and had not been painted since. Grace found him through the produce exchange in Elisha, where a clerk laughed at the name and then wrote an address on a scrap of paper without being asked twice, which told her something about how the old man was remembered. He was on the veranda in a wheelchair, with a plastic oxygen line under his nose and a Yoruba newspaper on his knees. And when the houseboy said a woman had come about a matter from 1985, he said, "Bring her, and bring the small chair." He looked at her for a long moment. "You are somebody's daughter, Moses Johnson." And Chief Isaac Thomas laughed, a wet, delighted, appalling laugh that turned into a cough and had to be waited out. "Ah," he said when he had it back. "Ah. 40 years and the boy finally sends somebody. He did not send me. No, he would not." He folded the newspaper with great care, the way very old men do everything. "Sit down. What do you want to know that you do not know already?" "Everything." "Then I will tell you, and you will not like me at the end of it. And I am 88, and it will not cost me one night's sleep." He settled back. "In 1985, I had 200 bags of cocoa going onto a vessel at Apapa in the second week of December. Do you know what a ship costs when it waits? You do not. Nobody who has not paid it knows." He tapped the arm of the chair with one finger. 4,000 naira went out of a bag under the seat of my lorry in that motor park, and 2 boys had been near that lorry all week, and I told the police to charge both of them. Both. That is on the paper. Both. And then I sat in my hotel that night and I did the arithmetic that anybody in business does. He said it without a flicker. The tall one had my contract in his name. If he went inside, my cocoa did not move, and my ship did not wait, and I lost more in 1 week than that bag was worth in 10. So I went to the police the next morning and I withdrew the charge against him and left it standing against the other one. He shrugged with one shoulder. One of them had to be free to carry my load. I did not care which. Grace sat very still. You did not care which. I did not care which. And I want you to hear it from my own mouth, because I have heard people say that I was deceived, and I was not deceived. His eyes were entirely clear. I knew there was a chance I was putting the wrong one inside. I decided that it was not my business which brother went. My business was the December vessel. He was 32 years old. Yes. He served 11 years. Yes. He looked out at his dead garden. I sat in that court on the 11th of November, 1985. I was there to make sure it was finished properly, so I could go back to work. And the magistrate, a small man, Igbo, very correct, asked your father whether anybody helped him. Twice. He asked it twice, because he could smell it. Anybody in that room could smell it. What did my father say? The old man's mouth moved. He said, "I acted alone." And then he said, "Do not enter my brother's name." The veranda was quiet, except for the oxygen. And I sat in that gallery, Chief Isaac Thomas said, and I thought to myself, this man is a fool. That is what I thought. Those exact words. He looked back at her. I have had 40 years to find a better thought, and I have not found one, and I am not going to pretend to you that it keeps me awake, because I am 88, and I sleep very well. But I have never once forgotten it, and I have forgotten the names of 2 of my own wives. Grace found that her hands were shaking and put them under her wrapper. There is a file at Elisha, she said. It has been out of the registry since 2015. Of course it has. He almost smiled. A young man came here that same year. Nice shirt. Very polite, the way they are polite now. He told me the family was being troubled by an old matter, and he would be grateful if I signed a small statement saying the matter had been settled and there was nothing further in it. He put 2 million naira on that table. And you refused. I threw him out of my house. The old man's chin came up, and for the first time something in his face was not amused at all. Not because I am a good man, madam. Do not make that mistake. I threw him out because he came into the house of the man who was actually robbed and offered him money to lie about it, as if I were a clerk. 2 million naira, to me. He said it with genuine, undiminished outrage. I was insulted. Grace almost laughed and did not. Sir, will you write that down? Write what down? All of it. That you charged 2 men. That you withdrew against Solomon Coker because you needed your cocoa moved. What my father said in that courtroom. That a young man came here in 2015 with 2 million naira. She leaned forward. In your own hand. Signed, with today's date. Chief Isaac Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned his head and called, "Bring paper, and bring the good pen, not that rubbish one." It took him 40 minutes, because his hand shook and he refused to be helped, and he insisted on starting again when he blotted the second page. When he had signed it, he held it out and did not let go of it immediately. "I am not doing this for your father," he said. "I want that clear. Your father was the only honest man in that yard in 1985, and I used him like a spanner, and I would do it again, because the ship does not wait. I am doing it because in this country everybody dies with their mouth still closed, and I am 88, and I would like to see one man's mouth open before mine shuts." He let go of the paper. "Now go home, and tell that Coker boy from me that his cocoa is not worth what he thinks it is." Patience Coker came to the room behind the mechanic's shed at 9 o'clock that night, on foot, alone, in a black wrapper, carrying a wooden box with a rope handle. The whole street watched her walk down it. "In 1990, I found a key in my husband's trouser pocket," she said, sitting on the step without being invited in. "I opened a storeroom at the back of that house, and there was a box in it, and the box was full of letters. I closed the door and put the key back, and I have not spoken about it in 35 years. She put her hand flat on the lid. "Every year on the 14th of August he posts money to an address in Kano. Every year it comes back unopened, and he puts it in here and does not open it either, and the next August he sends another one. 38 of them. Why have you brought it here? Because yesterday my son's lawyer filed a petition at the High Court in Osogbo, asking that my husband be declared unfit to manage his own affairs. There is a doctor's report attached. I have read it. It says a man of 69 has some difficulty with dates, which is true of a man of 69. Her voice did not change at all. It is enough. And if it is granted, then anything my husband ever says about 1985 is the talk of a sick old man, and it can never be undone, and my son will have spent his father's mind to keep his father's secret." She pushed the box across the step. "He discharged himself this morning. He is on a bus. He will be at that motor park tomorrow at 12, and I think he means to say all of it." She stood and straightened her wrapper. "I am not going to tell you what to do. I have spent 39 years not telling men what to do, and look where it has taken me." At the corner she stopped. "My husband's mother was called Comfort," she said. "In 39 years, he has never once said her name in my hearing. I learned it from the headstone. Friday. There was no tree, only a stump, and a churned semicircle of red earth, and the survey pegs going out toward the road. They came anyway. 9 of them unrolled the raffia mat on the bare ground where the shade used to be, and sat down in the sun, because 40 years is not a habit you can cut down in 11 minutes with a saw. By 12 o'clock half the town was standing round that stump. Word travels in a place like Owode the way water travels downhill. Baba Friday discharged himself. The Johnson woman has been to Ibadan. The wife walked down to the mechanic's shed at night with a box. The market women came. The touts came. The mechanic came with his hands still black. The headmaster came and stood well back with his arms folded. Grace had brought her father. He had not wanted to come. She had knelt by his mat at 7 that morning and read him what an 88-year-old man had written in a shaking hand in Ibadan, and Moses Johnson had lain there with his face to the wall for a long time, and then he had said, "Bring my stick." The silver pickup came at 10 to 12. Victor Coker got out with a document wallet under his arm, looked at the size of the crowd, and Grace watched his face and saw a man doing arithmetic very fast and not liking the answer. The Peugeot came at 20 past. The chief got out. No white, no cap, no gold, a plain brown booba, and 4 days of Ikeja in his face. He walked to the mat, looked at the stump, gathered the booba in his fist, and lowered himself into the dust, and the whole park watched him do it. He took his bowl from Papa Joseph. He looked at it in his hands. Then he set it down, and stood, and turned to face the town. And his son spoke first. "Before my father says anything," Victor said, loudly, "everybody here should know that he was discharged yesterday against medical advice, and that there is a petition before the High Court at Osogbo concerning his capacity, with a specialist report attached. I am asking you all, with respect, to remember that when you repeat whatever you are about to hear, it was the correct move. It was the move a Lagos business school teaches you. In that particular red dirt, in front of those particular people, it was the single worst thing he could have done, because 300 people in Owode had just watched a rich man's son stand up in public and tell the town his father was mad, in order to stop his father from speaking. The sound the crowd made went all the way round the circle and came back, and into it, before the chief could open his mouth, a young woman in a church wrapper stepped out with 2 sheets of paper in her hand. My name is Grace Johnson. My father is Moses Johnson, and this town calls him a thief, and my daughter was refused a place at that school last month because of it." She held up the first sheet. "This is written and signed by Chief Isaac Thomas of Bodia, Ibadan, 3 days ago. He is the man whose money was stolen. He is 88, and he is alive, and any one of you can go and ask him." Nobody in that park was moving. He says that in 1985, he told the police to charge 2 men, not 1. He says that he withdrew the charge against the second man, not because that man was innocent, but because that man was holding the contract for 200 bags of cocoa going onto a ship in December, and the ship would not wait. Her voice did not shake, and afterwards she could never explain why. He says he knew there was a chance he was putting the wrong brother in prison, and he decided it was not his business which brother went. She let that sit for 2 seconds. The name of the second man is written here in his own hand, Solomon Adebola Coker, 29 years old. Apprentice. The noise that went up then was a different kind of noise. And he says that he sat in the gallery of that courtroom on the 11th of November 1985, and heard the magistrate ask my father twice whether anybody had helped him. She read it out. He said, "I acted alone," and then he said, "Do not enter my brother's name." She lowered the paper. They had the same mother. Her name was Comfort. She was dying in the general hospital at Elisha, and the deposit was 600 naira, and one of her sons took 4,000 from under a lorry seat, and the other one went to prison for 11 years, so the first could stay outside and pay for her. She was looking at Chief Solomon Coker now, and so was everybody else. She died anyway, 3 weeks into the trial. There were about 4 seconds of silence. Then the richest man in Owode said, "It is all true." He said it standing, without hesitation, and afterwards half the town would say, that was the moment they forgave him, and the other half would say it was the moment they stopped. I took the money. Nobody helped me take it. My brother pleaded guilty to a thing I did, and I sat in the 3rd row and let him do it, and everything you can see on that hill is built on what was left of it. He turned to the crowd. But she has not told you the worst of it, because it is not written in any file, and only 2 men alive know it, and one of them has been on that mat for 3 years. He was breathing badly. In 1987, I went to the gate of Elisha prison with 3,000 naira in an envelope. I stood at that gate for 1 hour. He stopped and got it back. And then I went back to the lorry park. Because I understood that to give him that money, I would have to tell him to his face that I had let him go in, and I could not put my mouth on it. That is my sin, not the 4,000 naira, the gate. He looked down at the raffia mat. I have eaten on this ground every Friday for 40 years, and this town has called me a good man for it. I want it understood clearly. A man who eats on the ground once a week is not a good man. He is a thief with a calendar. Then Chief Solomon Coker lowered himself onto his knees in the red dirt in front of the whole of Owode. "Moses, ask me for anything." The blind man got up. He did it slowly, with his stick. Grace put a hand under his elbow and he shook it off, and he stood on that mat in a brown shirt that had lost its color and turned his ruined eyes toward the sound of his brother's breathing. "You are on your knees in the dirt," Moses Johnson said, and his voice carried further than anybody expected. "Get up. You have been on your knees in the dirt for 40 years, and it has not paid me 1 naira. He lifted the stick and pointed it. and by some accident of hearing, he pointed it exactly right. Keep your money. It came back for 38 years and it can go on coming back. His voice cracked and he took it under control, and the whole town heard him take it under control. Sonny, give me my name. I will. Say it in front of them. Moses Johnson, said the chief, did not steal anything. Not 1 naira, not 1 grain. He is not a thief. He never was. Again. He is not a thief. He never was. And the blind man's face came apart. Grace caught him as he went down, got her shoulder under his arm and lowered him onto the mat, and he held onto her wrapper with both hands and made a sound she had never heard a man make, and she looked up over his head at 300 people and saw the headmaster take off his glasses and turn away. Victor Coker had not moved from where he stopped, the document wallet still under his arm. His father looked at him from the ground. There is one more thing, the chief said, and it is not mine to give. Grace stood and turned and did not raise her voice. Withdraw the petition. Victor did not answer. You knew in 2015. You went to Ibadan with 2 million naira and an old man threw you out of his house. Then you paid a registrar in Elisha instead and took the file out of the court, and it is signed for in the ledger in your company's name, and that ledger is still on that counter today. She was very calm. You looked at my daughter's name on a list last month and let it be crossed off. Then you drove down here and offered me 600,000 naira to write it down and sign it. I am not asking you to be sorry. Withdraw the petition. And Victor Coker stood in the sun with 300 people looking at him, and what came over his face was not guilt. It was something far worse for him, and Grace understood it the moment she saw it. It was being pitied. I did it to protect this family, he said. I know, his father said from the ground. So did I. Come and sit down. For one moment, Grace would swear to it afterwards. The man almost did. Then Victor Coker turned and walked back to the silver pickup, and got in, and drove out of the gate of the old motor park, and did not come back for 4 months. Justice in a place like Owode does not arrive in handcuffs. It arrives in small, slow, unglamorous pieces, and you have to be paying attention to see it happen. The petition was withdrawn 9 days later, unopposed, by a lawyer in Osogbo who had never met either of them. Nobody was arrested. Ezekiel Wilson, who had signed that file out of the registry in 2015, returned the money he had taken, all of it, out of a pension that could not spare it, and was not prosecuted, and said afterwards that he would have preferred to be. The Elders' Council sat on the second Wednesday in November and formally struck the name. That was all it was. 6 old men in a room, a resolution read out, a book signed. But the crier went round with it, and the church announced it after the offering, and within a month, the boys at the gutter had stopped saying Thief Moses, because boys at a gutter say what their mothers say. The application to set aside the conviction went to the Attorney General's office in Osogbo and moved with the speed of all such things. 4 hearings in 14 months. Chief Solomon Coker attended every one, and after the second he stopped coming in the Peugeot and came on the same bus as everybody else, and sat on the wooden bench in that corridor with his brother beside him for hours at a time, and neither of them said very much. The trust did not close. Both banks in Alesha pulled their lines, and there were 4 hard months, and 11 trucks became 7. But a produce company, with a good crop, is still a produce company, and Patience Coker, who turned out at 52 to have a head for figures that 39 years of marriage had never once asked about, sat in the office at the back of the compound with the ledgers and kept it standing. In January, 30 names were read out in the assembly yard at St. Andrews. The clerk read them off the board in the flat voice clerks use, and about 2/3 of the way down he said, without pausing, without looking up, without the smallest flicker of anything at all, Johnson, precious. Grace was at the back by the gate. She put her hand over her mouth and kept it there. She did not take the 600,000. When the company's lawyer came with a revised offer and no signature line on it at all, she read it twice and handed it back, and asked instead for what everybody else in that park had been given. A lockup in the new frontage, controlled rent, 5 years, in her name. She has a padlock and her own key. Mama Rose came back from Isla in March with her crutch and a plastic bag and no money left, and stood at the mouth of that market a long time before she could make herself walk in. Grace looked at her for a while. "The orange notice on my stall," she said. "I went to Alicia on a Monday, and it was on my umbrella by 8 that night, and I have been trying since then to think who else knew where I went." Mama Rose did not look up from her crutch. "He gave me 100 naira," she said. "I want you to know it was 100 naira, not 1,000. He asked me what you were doing, and I told him, and he counted it into my hand like a man buying pepper." Neither of them said anything for a moment. "Sit down," Grace said. "There is food." And then, because she was her father's daughter and there were some things she was not going to pretend about, "You left him on the day the tree fell, and you sold me for 100 naira, and I am not going to say those things did not happen. Sit down and eat, and do not ever tell me again what my father is worth." The old woman sat down and ate. Moses Johnson refused, absolutely and finally, to live in the house on the hill. He said he had spent 11 years sleeping where other men put him, and he intended to finish in his own room. He accepted one thing from his brother, and only one. Every Friday at 12:20, in the new depot yard, at the edge of the concrete where the mango stump still stands with a green shoot coming out of the side of it, they put a raffia mat down on the ground. The chief comes. He sits in the dust. 9 or 10 of them eat. In August, 4 months after he drove out of that gate, a silver pickup came into the depot yard on a Friday and stopped a long way back, and a man in a gray shirt got out and stood at the edge of the concrete with his hands at his sides and did not come any closer. Nobody spoke to him. The chief did not turn round. It was the blind man who heard him breathing. "Sit down or go home," Moses Johnson said. "The food is getting cold." Victor Coker stood there a moment longer. Then he came across the concrete and lowered himself onto the mat in his good trousers, between his father and his uncle, and somebody put a chipped enamel bowl into his hands. For 40 years there had been an extra bowl on that mat, filled every Friday, covered with a leaf, touched by nobody. That afternoon, when the food had gone round, and the mat had eaten, and the sun had moved off the stump, an old blind man reached out with careful fingers, found it, lifted the leaf, and began to eat. And Chief Solomon Coker sat in the dust beside his brother and watched an empty bowl empty, and for the first time in 40 years, he did not have to look into anybody's face.